It is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host Smitty. Be sure that you are following us on all of our social medias, Twitter, Instagram, and go subscribe to us on YouTube as well. Leave us a review down there, leave a comment, and let us know what you think about the show and what you want to see in the future. Also, while you're on those listening platforms and YouTube, go check out the description of each of the shows, because at the top of the description, we have our link to Rockin' Around the 412 Year 6 in the previous 5 years. With the help of all of you, we've been able to raise over $25,000 for kids in our local 724 and 412 area codes. So be able to check that out. We also partner with the East Rochester Salvation Army as part of their Angel Tree to help adopt kids from that and be able to provide Christmas for them as well. So if you want to check that out or share the mission, that would help us a lot. You could donate at the link below as well. It's a GoFundMe link, so you can read all about it. And also, if you know of any families, or if you are a family yourself who could think you could be using some help this Christmas time, don't feel shy to let us know. You can DM Smitty or myself or the Around the 412 Twitter, or wherever you can contact us. Let us know, reach out to us, and we would be happy to hear you out.
Yep, absolutely. I think they covered it all. I will mention, again, a week from Saturday, that same Salvation Army in East Rochester is going to be having their back-to-school event. So if anybody, for some reason, would be in the area that's watching or listening to this, feel free to stop on by. I'll be hanging out there for a little bit, helping them out with that event. So excited for that before the Steelers' second preseason game. Pretty crazy to think that time is already coming. They have a preseason game on Friday. We'll talk about that a little bit in the second segment of the show. First things first. It happened. Finally, we'd go back weeks. We'd go back over a month at this point and talk about the Penguins' interest in Erik Karlsson. I said the entire time, I didn't know if it was just the hopium or what. He was going to end up being a Pittsburgh Penguin. Here we are. Erik Karlsson is a Pittsburgh Penguin in a massive trade involving 12 different pieces, 3 different teams involved. Shout out to the Montreal Canadiens for getting involved in this as well. And I know that, Erik Karlsson is probably coming to the Penguins on a higher cap hit than we would have hoped at $10 million. But I think that you take that trade-off when you look at all the assets that we're able to move out. I mean, if you were to break down the worst contracts that the Penguins had on their roster, they probably got rid of 4 out of the 5, with the only other one being one that's immovable in Jeff Carter. So Kyle Dubas has now really reshaped this roster when you look at it since he took over, and adding a Norris Trophy winning defenseman that, again, I thought that they needed, not because of the defense that he's going to bring, but to provide some scoring punch. And we'll get into, the whole Jake Guentzel thing in a little bit, but that just adds on to it. They needed somebody to provide some offense that wasn't currently on the roster. 101 points for Erik Karlsson last year. I don't expect that necessarily again. But he's going to be obviously a welcomed addition for this team at 5v5 and on the power play.
When you look back at the history of the Penguins, I do not think that there has been a trade that has impacted a team more than this trade, from a perspective of what they're bringing in, but also what they sent out. There's been several trades that throughout the history that you can go back and say, like, oh, this was a great trade because of the guy we acquired, but you also had to give up certain pieces. But what Kyle Dubas was able to do, from getting rid of essentially your worst players or your players with the worst contracts, and you're able to get the best player that was available to you, it was like magic work what Kyle Dubas was able to do in this trade. The fact that they got rid of Mikael Granlund and his contract, Jeff Petry's contract, Jan Ruda's contract, Casey DeSmith was off the roster. He essentially just cleaned out the garbage that was out back and brought in a shiny new toy. And I don't think that can really be understated more, because I was looking at some of the trades in Penguins history, and it's like, yeah, that was a really good trade, but I just don't think there's been this much disparity between what we got out of the trade and what we gave away. Because it literally looks like, if you just look at the graphic that Smitty is pulling up on the YouTube, or if you've seen the graphic, if you're listening in the audio platforms, of just the breakdown of the entire trade, the Penguins literally got rid of all of their bad contracts or bad players, and in one swing of the bat, and they were able to hit a home run and bring home Erik Karlsson. It was master class from Kyle Dubas. I'm still shocked by the trade and the fact that, I mean, Jeff Petry's just back in Montreal now. It's like that trade never happened. He was only here for a year, but I think that this is one of the biggest trades, especially on paper, even though Erik Karlsson hasn't taken a shift yet. But on paper, from a perspective of where this team, what they were able to get rid of, while they also what they were getting back in the trade, it was huge. I mean, this is such a big deal. And for the reasons you mentioned as well, we've talked about it for several weeks on this show. Last week was the first week in like a month that we didn't actually mention Erik Karlsson or have a segment talking about anything related to Erik Karlsson. And now we get to reap our reward. And looking at this trade, the Penguins do get Erik Karlsson, and then they get Rem Pitlick from Montreal, Dylan Hamulek from San Jose, and they get a 2026 third-round pick. Going out, the Sharks received the 2024 first-round pick for the Penguins, Mikael Granlund, Jan Rutta, and Mike Hoffman from Montreal. And then Montreal received the 2025 second-round pick from Pittsburgh and Jeff Petry from Pittsburgh, Casey DeSmith, and Nathan Legare. I really don't think, when you look at just what the Penguins gave up, you're talking about Jeff Petry, who was aging, a disappointment in Pittsburgh, and was on a bad contract. Jan Rutta, who is not that young, he was disappointing a little bit in Pittsburgh and was on that not that great of a contract. Casey DeSmith, you brought in Nedeljkovic, so you had to get that body out, and this is a way for the Penguins to not be able to come back with the same goalie tandem at least, and you can sell at least a little bit different. Sure, Jarry's still a starter, but you have a little bit of change there. And then Mikael Granlund. I mean, the guy literally did absolutely nothing, was on a bad contract, and Kyle Dubas avoids having to buy him out and gets him in a trade as well. And then Nathan Legare. I mean, we had hopes for him as a prospect when he was drafted by the Penguins, but he's slow, not moving up in the prospect pool. So it is what it is. And the first and second round pick, when you're getting a guy like Karlsson, who cares? I just don't think this trade could have gone any better, because the way that we had talked about it and thought that it could go, we thought that San Jose was going to retain more than they did. That it is what it is, but we did not think we were going to clean this much out of our closet when what was coming out. We didn't think that you were going to get, I mean, we thought there was a possibility maybe you could get Granlund and Petry in the same trade, but then you're also talking about Casey DeSmith going out and Jan Rutta going out. I mean, this is more than we ever could have anticipated.
Yeah. I actually kind of like it from Montreal to getting involved here, just trading Rem Pitlick and Mike Hoffman, getting that second round pick. Petry's still a serviceable player, and also with Pittsburgh retaining on that, you got to cheat him at 75% of what his original cap was. Casey DeSmith, I think, is a fine backup. Again, I think it's more about just not being able to run back the goaltending duo in Pittsburgh than anything else. And then Nathan Legare, though, to your point, I know when we first got him in Sam Poulin, we were excited about both of those guys. Neither one of them seemed to be like, they seem to still have that shiny prospect status. Nathan Legare's skating just hasn't improved at all since he became a pro. Not sure that he was ever going to be an NHLer, unfortunately, because he has a pretty decent shot, but if you have nothing else, it really doesn't matter. So I kind of like what Montreal did here. For San Jose, I mean, the big thing for them is the $10 million in cap space that they're going to have now, and they're going to get off of the books sooner. I know that you're taking on Granlund's $5 million, Hoffman's 4 point whatever, Rutta's 2.7. So really, you're negating that cap space for the time being. But Hoffman's a free agent after this year. Granlund is in 2. Rutta is in 2. So you're getting off of that money sooner. That was their intention here. And then you get a top 10 protected first round pick. I don't think the Penguins are going to be picking the top 10. So they'll probably get that first round pick. But yeah, obviously as a Penguins fan, I'm ecstatic about it regardless. But this is kind of, I guess, that's the return that I expected San Jose to get. I didn't think that the Penguins would be able to offload all of those bad assets in one deal. That's for sure. But yeah, here we are. I think that that's a great move. And again, Kyle Dubas, this is really him putting his handprints all over this roster at this point. He talked about trying to get Karlsson going back to his days. He said former place of employment. Clearly, he's trying to avoid saying Toronto in Maple Leafs. But clearly, Dubas has long been interested in Erik Karlsson, and I'm so excited now for the season to start. And I wanted to bring up something to you. Like I said, I wanted to talk about Guentzel here in a second, but something that I wanted to bring up because I haven't necessarily seen it yet. I'm sure somebody has said it, but I think there needs to be a lot of conversation about this. Uh, I think the Penguins' power play struggles have been well documented. Is anybody? I mean, I think there are people that are going to say that that there's people with more pressure on them, at least in my eyes. Is there anybody with more pressure on them than Todd Reirden next year? Because if the Penguins' power play still isn't good next season, how do you justify it? Like how do you justify if this unit next year isn't top 5 to 7 in the NHL? Like Todd Reirden is going to be on his way out, in my opinion, if that's the case.
Yeah, no, I agree fully. And when you look at what the first power play could be, there's a potential that Erik Karlsson would take over Letang's spot, and Letang could go to the second power play, or they could even roll into the possibility of you just run the two defensemen. I think
without Jake, at least to start the season, you'll see both. But
yeah, and so when you have Letang, I mean, would the first power play at that point be Letang, Karlsson, Sid, Gino, and would you put Rust or Raquel there?
So it's tough because to me, I don't know that Rust is really a net front presence guy either, but Raquel certainly isn't. Mm-hmm. So what otherwise are they going to ask Sid to be that guy?
That would be your only
around
option.
The net?
I feel like.
I mean, yeah, I'll say Raquel, but I don't love the idea of what that means for where Sid would be at.
I mean, even regardless, it doesn't really matter who that fourth skater is. When you look at the other four that you'd have, if you're not scoring at a better percentage next year on your power play, then something's got to give. Todd Reirden would have to go at that point because we've talked so much about the last several seasons of without Phil Kessel and what he brought to the power play as a playmaker and as a quarterback of that power play, they haven't really been able to find the same sort of vibe and be able to run the same power play that they did whenever he was here. So at this point, you have as much firepower as you've ever had on that power play if you're skating all those guys out there. And so I think you're right. If there is a ton of pressure on Reirden, and I think that the second power play could look really good too once Jake is healthy again. Because then you're talking about a second power play, assuming that Jake goes on the first power play, and let's even say that they keep Raquel on the first power play as well, or whoever it is. Then you would have Letang and Rust and Riley Smith and Jeff Carter, and then someone else on that second power play. Pick whoever you want to fill that last spot. Maybe Alex Nylander, maybe another defenseman, maybe it's like POJ or something. Who knows? But you're going to have two solid power plays from a skill level position. So I don't think that there is much of an excuse anymore. At this point, I feel like it is definitely more down to the scheme of the power play more than it is the actual skaters that are on the ice. And so if that's the case, then the scheme is coming from that coach, and that coach would have to go at that point, because we can't have the power play and special teams in general being a Achilles heel for the Penguins at this point.
I don't even think you can justify them being like middle of the pack next year. Like that's where they were at 5v5 too, is 16th in goals in the league last year. You would think that number is going to go up too. I mean, I don't know what reasonable expectations are for Karlsson. Let's talk about that. Coming off 101 points, we obviously don't expect that. It's kind of hard to look at just like the shorter, you can break it down to like what was it per game basis. But we've also had a lot of shortened seasons thrown in there too in recent history with him. What is a reasonable expectation, you think, for Erik Karlsson's 2023-2024 season?
Well, I think that automatically you're going to expect him to be with Marcus Pettersson, which is great. I know we talked about it before that Marcus Pettersson is probably one of the most underrated defensemen in the entire NHL, and what he's going to bring with Erik Karlsson.
updated
his hockey, his J Fresh card.
Yeah. I mean,
Is
I'll pull it up on here
96%
too.
of WAR. Yeah, no, he is one of the most underrated defensemen in the NHL, and he's probably the most underrated Penguin amongst the entire Penguins fan base. I would feel like, just based off of what I see when people talk about Marcus Pettersson. I think because of his size and how skinny and small he is, people underrate how good he is just positionally, good with his stick. Yeah, looking at that, he is in the 97th percentile of even strength defense. I mean, that is incredible, and like you said, and credit to you, this is probably going to be Erik Karlsson's best defensive partner that he's ever had, which will allow him to remain the offensive threat that he is. And I think that from a Erik Karlsson perspective, what this means and what reasonable expectations could be are, I'm not expecting him to reach 100 points again, but I think if you get like 60 plus points from Karlsson, and then on top of that, I think he's going to be playing first line minutes. That's what I would anticipate, because I don't think a trade like this is for a second line defenseman. I think that you're going to have Erik Karlsson as the first line defenseman come October.
See, I think Karlsson is going to play the bulk of the power play. Letang will take a back seat there, and their minutes will be pretty much even. But I think Letang plays slightly more at 5v5.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be so close though that it really doesn't even matter. And I like
it might be minuscule.
I like Pettersson more than I like Graves. So like I think that could end up being their best pairing when you talk about how they complement each other. Pettersson too, just 26 years old, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, he's been here since 2018.
But I mean, you look at everything here and what actually matters for defensemen. I mean, you got to like everything about this. Like, really, the only things in the red, finishing, goals per 60, you would expect those to not necessarily be that great for Marcus Pettersson. The penalties would be the only other thing. The competition level, I bet you see that percentage go up this year. I think he's going to play some harder minutes. That's why, we keep talking about like Ryan Graves being the Dumoulin replacement. I think Pettersson is going to be what Dumoulin was during his best years, though. Like, we're already kind of seeing it when we talk about how undervalued he is by a subset of this fan base. I really think this is the guy that is their number one left-handed defenseman, whether the minutes are going to reflect that or not.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in the 98th percentile of penalty kill and 97th of even strength defense, it's hard to get much better than that. Literally only 2 or 3% better than that. So you don't really have to sell me on it. I mean, you and I have been on Marcus Pettersson's train for several years at this point. So I'm really excited to see what a pairing of him and Karlsson could look like. And I think that this, from a scoring perspective, is exactly what the Penguins needed. And there were arguments, and we talked about it with the Knicks from the Iceberg podcast. But I do think that this was a move they needed to do because of the lack of scoring, and they didn't really address a ton of scoring in their bottom six in the offseason. It was more of you got better defensively, and we're going to prevent people from scoring instead of we're going to outscore the opposition. Now you have somebody that's able to make up for that, and especially with Jake out for what could be a month into the season at the earliest. It's someone that could provide more offense as well from that blue line, and that's something the Penguins have needed. They haven't really had a heavy scoring blue line the past several seasons, which was a part of their DNA whenever they had those back-to-back cup runs in 16 and 17. So I think that this is a perfect way to get back to what the Penguins were then from a defensive standpoint, and having the offensive defensemen being able to provide and generate offense when needed. And it's a complete game changer. I mean, there's not every day where the Penguins or really any team, like when your team is making a blockbuster trade, but like trading for Erik Karlsson, that is huge. And in the fashion that the Penguins did it, with what they were able to get off of their books, it makes the trade that much even better without him even taking a shift yet.
Yeah, let's go to the Guentzel portion of this now. I have an ankle surgery, or had ankle surgery, I should say.
Mhm.
Going to miss. He won't be even reevaluated until after their first 5 games of the season. So, who knows what the timetable is here? Um, it sucks. I really don't know what else to say other than that. I mean, at least it's happening now and not like right before the season. It's unfortunate that this is something that was kind of that had already happened basically, but he felt good enough to be playing in that the beauty league, and he had been doing that up until like 4 days before he had the surgery. So it wasn't something that he just hurt then. Um,
Mhm.
like look at Sid's wrist, right? Like Sid's wrist was bothering him for a long time, just wasn't getting surgery in the offseason. Finally, it just gave, and there was no other option for him. And that's kind of how I'm viewing Jake's ankle here. I guess the only concern is we've seen a name that we already mentioned on this podcast, Brian Dumoulin. Now, I'm not trying to compare them as players, obviously, but we've seen him get an ankle surgery and the player that he was after that. Jake Guentzel going into the final year of his contract, coming off an ankle surgery. Is there cause for concern in terms of the player that he is going to be when he returns?
I think there is. And I think that with pretty much any player that has a surgery like that, not just those two specific players. But I think there is, and for the reasons that we you just mentioned too, because we talked about having thoughts of, do we re-sign Jake Guentzel? We had those discussions on the show before. And if Jake comes back and he doesn't look like the same player, he looks like he's lost a step. I mean, you saw a little bit of his regression, especially at 5-on-5 last year. If it starts to slope down, I'm not saying I want him gone, but there's definitely a steep cliff that can happen with players when it comes to surgeries like that. And so I think that it's definitely a wait and see. You have to see what he looks like when he comes back, but I am definitely concerned about it because we saw a little bit of the regression at 5-on-5 last year, and if that were to continue, you could turn into a Brian Dumoulin like scenario. But the difference being he's in a contract year. So I guess we're on a wait and see basis with him. I hope he doesn't lose a step. I hope he just comes back and feels completely fine and feels like the same player that he's been. But with an injury like that, you never know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to project that he's going to fall off in the way Brian Dumoulin did or not be able to get back to the level that he was playing at. You certainly hope that he's going to, but I certainly think that it is something that has to be on your mind when you think about this team and where you're projecting them to be and where the goal's going to come from. And that's why a name that I want to throw out there that's still available on the market, Thomas Tatar, I think should be on the Penguins' radar at this point. I think he can play in the bottom six. I think he could jump into the top six. Don't think he's going to cost a ton of money. Elliot Friedman actually mentioned his name specifically when saying he didn't think the Penguins were done. They could still add a player like that to their forward group. And it would give somebody, now, of course, I just said, like with Jake out, somebody's got to jump into the top six. Maybe that's him if he's added, but it would also, when healthy, when Jake is back, give them a player within the bottom six that you feel could score, 15 to 18, even push for 20 goals within that group.
That's a good point. That's a name that I would like to see the Penguins bring in. I think that would shore up your offensive group right now, more than what it is right now, especially to open the season. Because you look at that top six now, I would assume that on the top line, one of Riley Smith or Brian Rust would move up to play on the top line. And then what I think is a possibility that could happen, you could have Evgeny Malkin with the leftover of Riley Smith or Rust, and then maybe a guy like Alex Nylander starts the season on the second line, and they experiment
You know
with
what I was
that.
going to say is I was going to throw Jeff Carter on the wing up there because he's played some right wing
Potentially,
for Gino. Yeah.
potentially that's a possibility too.
But Nylander
But
did last year too in spurts. So
Nylander did in spurts, and we always mention his pedigree. So
Yeah.
he's got that 8th overall pedigree. Maybe he starts the season up there, but someone's going to have to. Jake's not going to. So there's going to be a body that's missing, and so Thomas Tatar would make sense because Well, I mean, the guys we're talking about, Alex Nealer and Jeff Carter, they're not shoo-ins to be for sure like second-line scorers. So Thomas Tatar would at least make me feel better about the depth of the forwards entering the season.
Yeah. So whether that's him or somebody else, I think with Jake out, I'd like to see an addition to the forward group. Because I just think for right now, while he's out, it's necessary. And then when he comes back, man, it just makes me feel a lot better about that bottom six. If you have just even one guy within there that can provide some scoring punch the way that Thomas Tatar has throughout his career, which is also insane to me that he's bounced around as much as he has, considering the impact that he continues to put up regardless of where he goes. So,
yeah. So, assuming that Jake would go on to LTIR, I don't know how long he'd stay on there, but if he is on LTIR, the Penguins will have $5.9 million of cap space.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's plenty of, it's just, they can definitely get around it up until when Jake comes back. And then I
guess you evaluate when he comes back. But if it's late enough in the season where you basically Tampa Bay the game and say, Kucherov, you're staying, Jake, you're staying on LTIR until the playoffs.
I mean, hopefully we're not even looking at it being close to that long, but
yeah.
All right.
I mean, who knows? Ankles are weird.
Yeah, that's true. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and talk about the Steelers. Like I said, preseason game coming up on Friday. We're well into training camp at this point. What's been going on? I've been having conversations, obviously, with Alan every day on Steelers Afternoon Drive, the other podcast that I host, and getting some good info on what's been going on there. So we'll talk about some of that stuff when we come back. Don't go anywhere. All right. The Pittsburgh Steelers open up their preseason schedule. Just 3 games now, going to 17 regular season games. They open up the preseason on Friday, going to Raymond James Stadium to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Great opportunity for guys, especially like shortening the preseason. The coach has got to see a lot more in less time. So, guys that are fighting for jobs here, this is always a great opportunity. I feel like every year I say that I'm more intrigued about the preseason. I think it was definitely truer last year than any other year because of having Kenny. But like now this year, I'm so excited to see Broderick, Darnell. I mean, it's the rookie class. I'll just throw them in as one. The rookie class for sure. But then, Calvin Austin, who we didn't get to see at all last year, I'm very excited about. And then like, who in the secondary is going to be getting reps because I wouldn't expect to see Minka play, and he hasn't really practiced that much. DeMonte KZ just came out of that boot, so it's going to be a lot of guys, again, fighting for roster spots. The Kenny Robinsons, Elijah Rileys of the world who have taken a lot of snaps. Trey Norwood's taken a lot of snaps with those guys not being there. So I don't know that there's like a lot of starting jobs that have like competition, but certainly when you go down the roster for who's going to be, the 48th man, the 49th man, 50, 51, 52, 53, who will be those bottom of the roster guys, I think there's a ton of competition. So I'm excited to get to the preseason just for that reason.
Yeah, and one position group that you didn't mention that I'm interested to see play in-game action is the linebackers, just because we talked over a lot how
Mark Robinson is
he's the only turnover from last year, and I'm curious to see how he looks, but also all the newcomers with Cole Holcomb, Landon Roberts. I mean, there's and newly addition Koan Alexander as well. But there's a lot of guys that have never played an actual game at linebacker for the Steelers, and it's all new. So I'm curious to see what that position group looks like. Hopefully, we get some good linebacker play on this weekend, and that's one that I'm definitely going to be watching because there's no familiarity with anybody there except for a little bit of Mark Robinson. We got a taste last year.
I guess the question for me within that group is how much are those guys going to play even? Outside of Mark Robinson, they're all kind of vets. So I think they'll probably want to see some, and the Steelers definitely do play their guys more in the preseason than most teams. Alan and I were talking about that. Like, that's why the Steelers, you look back at their last 2 openers, they've won games that they probably shouldn't have against Buffalo and Cincinnati. And it's because those 2 teams don't play their guys in the preseason. and they're not getting those reps. So there is a benefit to the Steelers, playing their guys in the preseason. As frustrated as it might make people, they come out more prepared early in the season. You see Buffalo and Cincinnati obviously finish stronger because they're better football. They've been better football teams the last couple seasons, but right out of the gate, the Steelers have been a better football team than those two teams the last 2 years. That's the reason why they're getting those reps in the preseason. I still think we're going to see guys. I think that we're going to see Kenny play. I don't want to say like a good bit. I think he's going to play in the preseason enough. Like, I still think he's going to get reps in the preseason. What game will he see the most time in? I would say the second one, the one home one that they have against Buffalo. It's harder to say because, like, typically in past years before we went to this new schedule, when there was 4, we knew it was going to be that third one where we saw the starters play a half. Now it's kind of like the coaches do it differently. Like, it seems like everybody around the league has their own method to their madness. But the Steelers are going to play their guys. I think that, everybody on this roster, barring health, is going to see time at some point in the preseason. So I'm really excited. I'm glad you brought up the linebackers, though, because Mark Robinson, I should have mentioned specifically by name, too, for somebody I'm excited to watch. He looks huge, like physically looks huge. And I think they like him a lot. Like, I mean, that sounds stupid to say. Obviously, they drafted him. They like him. But I think they feel like there is something there. I know they added another linebacker in Quan Alexander, and they're not putting a lot on his plate right now. But I think that they're just excited about continuing to develop this guy that had only played 1 year at linebacker before they got him in their hands. So I'm excited to see his development continue. Slot corner, like who's going to be? That's going to be a battle too.
The curious thing to me about the nickel is right now on their depth chart, Shannon Sullivan is listed as the first string nickel, which I feel like is probably expected. It's very chalk that that's what you brought him in for, so you're not going to have somebody else there. But I'm curious to see what other corners are they going to have play in the slot throughout the preseason. Like, are they going to experiment and have some of these like outside corners move inside and get reps there, like Patrick Peterson or someone else? Like, I'm curious, is that just the plan from the Steelers perspective? Is like Chandon Sullivan is our slot corner and we already know that, or are they going to experiment with someone else? That's something that would be interesting to me to see.
We know that rookies don't get put as starters like ever, and this is just the initial depth chart. Like, there's really doesn't mean much. I'll be curious to see how it is after like the second preseason game, even more so than the first one. But Patrick Peterson also just hasn't done a whole lot in general so far in training camp, and I don't know that he's going to for the most part anyway. So I still think that we're looking at it by the time that this conversation is taking place right before their opener against San Fran, where it's in base. Yeah, you're going to see Patrick Peterson, Levi Wallace on the outside. But when they go into nickel, it's not going to be Chandon Sullivan as the first guy in the field. It's going to be Joey Porter Jr. on the outside and Patrick Peterson kicking inside. That's realistically what I think to happen. Now, when they go into like dime and you're talking about having 2 slot corners on the field, maybe it is Chandon Sullivan as opposed to like a Keanu. I would still go with like a Keanu Neal though as a dime backer. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. Chandon Sullivan started out camp pretty well. The last few days have not been good for him. From what Alan tells me, he's given up a ton right now, which, you go back, he gave up the most yards in the league last year from the slot. So, yeah, I'm very curious as to how that battle plays out though, too. The other thing is the offensive line. 3 tackles have been really good, like the 3 that you are going to have to play. But they don't have a 4th tackle, really. Like, LaRaven Clark has been getting beat basically every single rep. I think he was the guy they kind of brought in hoping to be that guy right away. So, like a break glass in case of emergency. Broderick Jones wasn't ready early on, and one of those 2 guys goes down. LaRaven Clark was a guy with NFL experience. He has not been good, seemingly losing every single rep. So I wonder, and I brought this up to Alan, if they could deal from their interior depth and move a guy like Kevin Dotson, and even if it's not straight up for a tackle, recoup a day 3 pick and then flip that day 3 pick for a tackle or something like along those lines. I still think that they're going to add, and I know they keep bringing in like bodies for camp. I wouldn't consider that really an addition. I still think they're going to add somebody to the secondary by the time that they get to the end of camp here.
Do you think they look at safety or corner, or just in general? Secondary.
I could see it being somebody that could play. They're going to have to play in the slot. I mean, I'm not talking about a boundary corner here. I think they have what they need there. I think it could be a guy that does both. If it's just one, then it's a slot corner.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense, because that's the position in the secondary we've been having the most conversation about. We're still unsure.
Alan also said that lines up though. Like that's been their weakest looking group so far through camp. We got asked that question. Somebody posted it under yesterday's show and we answered it today. And I said, I mean, that's one of the 2 spots coming into camp that we had the most questions about, that and inside linebacker. And inside linebacker, you had like decent players. It's just guys that haven't played on the Steelers.
They haven't played
together.
Here.
Yeah. So that's where the questions were coming from. The slot. I mean, I just have questions about the personnel that's even here. So interesting conversation. I'm curious to see how the preseason plays out.
Someone that I'm interested to see, or some positions that I'm interested to see. So it seems like our front in the defensive line is pretty stout with like Larry Ogunjobi, Cameron Hayward.
We have so many good
Adams.
defensive linemen.
But like I want to see like Braden Fajoku, DeMarvin Leal, Keanu Benton, Isaiah Loudermilk. Like what are some of these guys going to look like in the preseason? I think
Alan can't stop talking about Loudermilk.
I think there's going to be, and I'm not even mentioning like Armand Watts, Manny Jones. I mean, there's several guys that I feel like there's going to be healthy competition. Maybe not necessarily for starters, but like to fill out your depth chart and to move up and down the depth chart. I'm curious to see like what does year 2 DeMarvin Leal look like? Is he going to be less of a tweener, less of an inside-outside guy, or is he going to look like more of a traditional defensive tackle in year 2? What's rookie Keanu Benton going to look like in game action? I think the defensive line, even though we have what looks like our starters pretty much filled out with Larry Ogunjobi, Montravius Adams, and Cameron Hayward, I think that'll be interesting to see, like, who are some of the guys that are performing at the best level to be the next man up on that defensive line. So that'll be interesting thing to me. And then the other thing that was pretty fun, and I'm sure you and Alan talked about it, how the use of Kendrick Green at fullback in camp.
Yes.
That's a very interesting idea.
They better break that out on Friday in that preseason game, because Kendrick Green's not a starter anyway. So like what if he plays, he'll probably place like a good bit of center in that game and then use him at fullback when it's McCollum as the center with the third string.
I think that would be really fun. And it's a way to honestly not necessarily, I can't say make up for the pick of Kendrick Green, but like at least it's a way for him to be useful to the team if that's how they're going to use it. Yeah, it's a way to make the roster, but it's a way to like I can see them if you're on the goal line using a package with him in there. I think that could be a realistic possibility. I think that would be a fun idea too, just from a fan perspective, looking at Kendrick Green playing fullback. Like that's a big dude running down the hole. So I think that would be pretty cool, pretty fun to see that they experimented with that in practice this week. And yeah, so going forward, like that's another thing I'd look at is like how do they use Kendrick Green at that fullback position? Because they don't really have a true fullback. Like I mean, they do, but with technically, like Connor Hayward is listed as their fullback, but he's like he's in between a tight end.
He threw a pass today.
He did. Wait, what?
He threw a touchdown to Farmy. I was about to say Matt Canada went into the bag of tricks today for practice. They were running a bunch of end arounds, jet sweeps, and doing some different things. Connor Hayward was getting carries from the fullback spot, and then they ran a jet sweep, but instead of running, as soon as Connor Hayward faked like he was going to run the ball to the outside, stopped on a dime and threw the ball to Freiermuth in the end zone.
So that would be really fun to see.
I want to see this. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I want to see this stuff in the game. Like people, it's funny because like when it's happening in training camp, everyone's like calling Canada an idiot and stuff like that. Isn't this what we're looking for? Is creativity? Like I don't know. I'm totally cool with experimenting the way that they have.
That's what we thought we were getting with Canada. We thought back when he was named OC, didn't we think that we were going to get a creative offense? So
yeah.
I'm open for it if it's useful and if it's productive. I just can't I can't imagine being the middle linebacker that has to take on the hole that has a 6'4", 350-pound Kendrick Green coming into the into the A gap or something.
That's like the
so
fullback funny. The fullback in Baltimore, Pat Ricard. He's like 300 pounds. He was a D end, and they made him a fullback. He's pretty similar in terms of what he brings to the table as Kendrick Green. Kendrick Green, though, Alan was telling me, like, he'll be burning, like, he's fast. He's a really good athlete. Yeah. Like, that was never the question. That's not why he failed at center. He was like burning past Najee on some of these, like when he was lining up at fullback. Like, he was doing too far ahead of him. So I hope that we see it in game. I'm excited for it, but this is a way for him, in my opinion, to secure a roster spot, because I don't think that he was taking like a strike. He was losing some reps on the second team to McCollum. So I started to question whether they would bring in, a backup center at some point, but them using him now in this capacity, I think his spot on the 53 is pretty safe. I think, the sudden retirement of Monty Pottenbaum kind of opened up these reps for Kendrick to experiment with this.
Yeah. I'm also curious to look at how the wide receivers are going to be used. I feel like the top three are definitely not in question. You have Allen Robinson, George Pickens, and Deontay Johnson. But then after that, you assume that Calvin Austin is going to be the fourth guy. But then after him, who's going to be your fifth receiver that they retain? I saw a video today of Miles Boykin throwing a stiff arm in a rep, but I feel like there's an open competition for that fifth wide receiver spot too. So even though there's not a lot of competition for starters, I feel like there is definitely competition, like you were saying, for that like back end of the depth chart, those last few guys that are going to make the roster. There's some healthy competition there still.
Gunner's had a good camp too. I mean,
I
think that it's I think they could carry 6. That's the thing, though.
If they bring back Gunner, can I at least get Calvin Austin returning punts?
Well, he is on the depth chart. He is number 1 right now for both punt and kick return.
Good.
Yeah. Good. So, we'll see how that goes. But it's that if they keep 6, it's gonna be a big question, because you're gonna have. I feel like 5 right now I would give to Boykin because of what he brings special teams wise. For 6, you're gonna have Gunner, Hakeem Butler, Des Fitzpatrick. I mean, you're gonna have some guys competing for that spot there. Hakeem Butler's had a lot of drops.
Well, that's why he's the fifth receiver, not the first one.
Yeah. I think that's it for Steelers talk. Unless you got anything you want to bring up.
Nothing in particular. Just excited to actually see Steeler football this week.
Yeah. There will be games on Thursday, but we don't play until Friday.
We were a bunch of degenerates last week watching the Hall of Fame game.
Yeah, most watched Hall of Fame game since 2018.
And it was more watched than the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup playoffs, or the Stanley Cup Final. They were listing all these sporting events. It's like, yeah, America is it's a football country still. Like, football is king.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll be right back. We're going to talk a little bit of Pirates baseball. Don't have too much on that front. They are playing right now. So it might be breaking the fourth wall as we're talking about this, but we'll be right back and we'll wrap up talking about the Pirates. All right, so as we sit here currently, Colin Holderman is pitching in the top of the 6th with 2 outs. The Pirates lead 6-4. The bases are loaded. He's trying to get out of this jam. Like I said, base loaded, 2 outs, 6-4. Mitch Keller started this game, and that's actually where I wanted to start the conversation about the Pirates, because it's been a tale of 2 halves for Mitch Keller. He's channeling his inner James McDonald right now for the Pittsburgh Pirates, or 2013 Jeff Locke, however you want to say it. But it's been a tale of 2 halves for Mitch Keller. You look at what he's done. I mean, even a little bit before the All-Star break, but definitely after the All-Star break, his last few starts, he did have one where against the Phillies where he went 5 2/3, 6 hits, 2 runs. But other than that, 8 runs last time out. Today, he couldn't get through 6. 6 runs in his start against the Angels 3 starts ago, 8 runs before that in his start against Cleveland. Just not good, basically, since the All-Star break for Mitch Keller. Is there something that and he just Holderman just walked in the run. Great. Is there something with Mitch Keller, if you've watched any of his starts recently, that looks different from the first half to the second half, or what do you think it is? Like, why all of a sudden has he reverted not all the way back to the Mitch Keller of old, but he looks so different than he did pre All-Star break?
I don't know, and I feel like definitely the environment of the team he's playing on doesn't help. The fact that the Pirates kind of leveled out to what we thought they were, I don't think that helps with a pitcher's confidence with the team behind him. But from the first half to the second half, I don't know if it's like just his pitch placement and where he's throwing the balls, because I don't see a huge difference for me, and I don't see like a confidence issue that like I've seen in the past, because before Mitch Keller didn't really look like a guy that even wanted to be out on the mound, but I don't think that's the case from the first half to the second half. But it's interesting to me just the steep drop off, because I'm looking at his splits and like over the last 30 games, so basically 30 games of his season that he's pitched. On the season, he's got like a 4.39 ERA, which it's definitely taken a dip because of his recent performance. But in his last 7 starts, he's 0-5, which we don't put a lot of stock into a pitcher's like win-loss, but when you're 0-5, it doesn't leave me to believe that the rest of the stats on your stat line are going to be pretty good, because he has a 7.22 ERA in that time, in those 7 starts. He's walked a lot of guys, I feel like. That's another thing. He wasn't walking a ton of guys. That's one thing I'll say I noticed, is he started to get the walks up again, which was an issue that he has dealt with in the past. His whip has gone up. He's not striking out as many guys. But I don't know if it's all just the length of the season where he was performing at such a high level, is like this is him just coming back down to earth. I don't know. Like, where is Mitch Keller as a starter? Is he somewhere in between what he has shown his last several starts and what he was in the beginning of the season, or is he one or the other and was performing either above where he is or below where he is? It literally is a tale of two halves. And I made the joke that he's just lowering his annual amount that he's going to have to earn when the Pirates give him an extension. He's just being team friendly right now, but that's just me being optimistic.
Well, the Pirates will probably appreciate that. Bob Nutting certainly will appreciate that. Because they certainly would still like to bring him back, I would think. Yeah, I don't know that I've really noticed anything mechanically looking at him. I don't know if there's been like a side-by-side shot to really break down and look at that, but at least like nothing jumps off the map to me. So I don't know what it is. Like some of it has been just like bad luck too. I'm not saying he's been good. Like he hasn't been good. But I really don't know what to attribute it to. It's just it's another I don't even know what's the opposite of feather in the cap. Like what would the opposite thing be if you're talking about in a negative light? Because
knife in the back,
maybe for Oscar Marine.
I don't know. Mitch
Keller was kind of like the saving grace for what Oscar Marine's time in Pittsburgh has been, and now with him going in the wrong direction, I don't see a reason to keep him around either. I mean, the entire coaching staff to me has not been good, but I look at his tenure and it's like, who has he made better if Mitch Keller is not the answer to that now?
Yeah. I mean, and these stats haven't been updated for tonight's game. Obviously, this game is still happening as we're listening. It's Tuesday night's game against the Braves. But in April, May, and June, his ERA was 2.93 and 3.56 among those months. And then you get to July and it jumps up to 6.28 on the month. And then August is sitting right now at 14.4. But that was definitely escalated or accelerated by that one game. And he's only had the one start, I believe, in August. Because it's been a short month right now. This is the second start of the month. So that'll come down a little bit based off tonight. But there has been a little bit of an incline over the past couple months. and I'm just trying to see anything else that like sticks out over that. Is the walks have gone up from his first 2 months pitching in April and May. He walked eight guys and 5 guys, and in June and July, which June was still a decent month for him, but you started to see it go up. But he 11 guys, 12 guys, and the strikeouts definitely down. May he struck out 53 guys, and in the 2 months after that, he struck out 25 and 27. So, I just maybe it's just a bit of some bad luck. I mean, there are some ups and downs to a season as a team and as players. You see them, especially with 162 games. But this is something that you would like to see not be a more consistent thing that it has been for Mitch Keller. Because I think we talked early on in the season, or maybe this is even last season. Maybe I'm blurring baseball seasons together, where it felt like Mitch Keller would get like 1 or 2 good starts, and then he'd have 1 or 2 bad starts, and then 1 or 2 good ones. Like it was just flip flopping. But now it's been a lot of bad for a lot of the time. They haven't really had a lot of the good starts recently. So I don't know. It's been an unfortunate thing for Mitch Keller, especially after the starts of the season he had, being an all-star and everything. But it's almost done. Maybe he just needs to reset and get through this season.
I don't know what the answer is. Let's end on a positive note though, because I really like what I've started to see from Endy Rodriguez. Kind of bummed that he's not in the lineup today. I get that maybe Jason delay catching was a way to try to get Mitch Keller back on track, and he was okay today. Went 5 innings, gave up 3 runs. Nothing to really write home about, but wasn't terrible. He gave him a chance to win. I think Endy sitting though is still what I have an issue with. Find a way to, like, whether it's DH. I mean, you could. He's played in the outfield in the minors. They haven't done it yet in the majors. I think you got to keep his bat in the lineup right now and let him continue to find something, because I think you might have found something. He's really started to hit the baseball well. 3 hits 2 games ago. Hit a home run in yesterday's game. I'm intrigued. They're also 8-5 in games where he started. So you look at since he's come up, games he started versus hasn't. He's been a big X factor for them when in the lineup. So I liked what I've seen from Endy as of late. I hope that he stays away from Andy Haynes and doesn't listen to a single thing that he says, because you've seen kind of on the opposite end of that, Henry Davis, who came up and was hitting really well right away. He's gone into a little bit of a slump now where he has like 2 hits in like his last 30 at bats or something crazy like that. I still like Henry Davis as a player. I still think he's going to be okay. But again, just on the opposite side of the pitching side with Oscar Marine, who's Andy Haynes making better?
These are all fair points. You're making some fair points. Andy Haynes makes nobody better, and I would say, like, maybe it is a case of, at least with Henry Davis, that maybe the major leagues have figured him out more. Not to say that he was like on a tear and needed figured out, but he's been up here a little while, so maybe there's some more tendencies that teams are picking up on with Henry Davis that they can exploit. I'm just trying to make excuses for him besides just blaming Andy Haynes for everything is what I'm trying to do. But yeah, Endy himself, he's been good. He's getting on base over a third of the time in his last 15 games. So I think that's really positive. Endy is one of the guys that we were excited about coming up here, one of the young guys. And I'm encouraged to see that, even though like Nick Gonzalez didn't have a ton of sustained success, but like Henry Davis for a while had some success. Endy is having some success. We aren't seeing these guys just come up and struggle right away and struggle for a prolonged period. There is some improvement that they get over their first few games, and even though Henry Davis has slumped a little bit, I'm encouraged by what I've seen from some of the young guys that we brought up. It makes me more encouraged about like what the future of the team could be with a lot of these AAA players that we've been calling up.
I'll be a lot more encouraged if we can count on Mitch Keller being a part of the top of the rotation during that time, because the pitch that we've had lately, that would put a damper into the way that we're viewing the next few years in this competitive window. We didn't necessarily think he needed to be the number one starter, like when Steens comes up, I think it's fair to expect he's going to be the best pitcher in the rotation fairly soon. But if you can't even count on Mitch Keller to be, the guy behind him, that probably changes how you feel about their competitive window.
Yeah, that's fair. And I would love to actually hear what some people who have pitching knowledge and baseball knowledge, real baseball knowledge, actually say about this situation. Like, what do they think's going on with Mitch Keller, or what they think is going on with the slump like Henry Davis has been in? Someone who actually knows what could be happening, because obviously we are not those guys. We make our own observations, but we are not the baseball analysts that a lot of other people are. And so I'm curious to see what an actual person would say, like that would say, like, what is wrong with Mitch Keller, or what's been the problem the past 2 months with Mitch Keller. I'm curious what it would be.
Yeah. Well, for all that conversation, go to a different podcast. It's not going to happen here, so.
You're not going to get it here. But check out the Steelers and then Hockey Talk, though.
There you go. Also, by the way, Colin Selby up with the big club now. Great beard. I went back. I was like, that name sounds familiar. He DM'd us, not us him, and asked about getting a Trust the Buck and Process shirt. He's got to be one of the few. I just asked him today, so I know that he's obviously busy right now. Hopefully he replies, because I was like, if you didn't end up getting one on your own, we'll send you one, because he was going to buy one. And he was like, yeah, I'll probably just
he's
do it
that guy?
Yeah.
Because I remember you telling me about that like 4 or 5 years ago, about a player on the Pirates, in the Pirates organization, that was going to buy a shirt.
Yeah.
I remember this. I remember this conversation, but had no idea who the player was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, he's up with the big club now, so
look at that.
Wish him all the best.
Maybe if he responds to you, maybe we get him into the clubhouse. Who knows? Yeah. I mean, 4 years ago we got a shirt into the clubhouse, so maybe we can do.
What I actually might have, instead of doing it with what we like the old Trust the Buck and Process, I might have Haley actually, because she already has the design now. It's just not on any shirts yet, I don't think.
Right.
I might.
Hey Haley, can you make 25 of these T-shirts?
Hey, there you go.
No specific reason.
Great publicity. But all right, that's everything that we got here. Again, subscribe, like, hit that notification bell, leave us a 5-star review if you're listening somewhere else. Leave us a comment. Let us know how you feel about whatever we talked about. Feel free to chime in on any of the topics. Let us know what you want to see in a future episode. And in the description, we got the links. I mentioned Haley with Everything Custom Designs. Those will be down there, as well as year 6 of Rocking Around the 412 being kicked off as of last month. First 5 years of doing the mission, we've raised over $25,000. Last year, we also partnered up with the East Rochester Salvation Army with their Angel Tree of Hope, and we're going to adopt a bunch of kids this year again. If you guys know anything about the Angel Tree, that's kind of how it works. Literally, all the kids' names are on a tree, and a lot of businesses, or like I get just individual people will go in there, and they'll just pick off of a tree a kid with, and it has their list right on this tree, this whatever's hanging on the tree. And so we did 15 of those kids last year, and we're going to get a bunch this year too. And of course, do families like we've been doing in the past as well on top of that. But it's been a great way for us to incorporate Kaylee and Isla and honor Dalton's name with the Salvation Army stuff. It still blows me away going back to last year with how selfless Kaylee was and wanting that to be what we did with that, as opposed to giving Isla her Christmas. So I'm happy that we're going to continue to do that and partnering up with the East Rochester Salvation Army. You can find out more about them. They have their own Facebook page. You can see like what they do. There's a church inside there. They have a food bank attached to their building as well. They do a lot more than just, what you think of when you think of the Salvation Army. So, but yeah, I think that's everything. So for Tyler, I'm Smitty. Come back here next week for more of the same stuff, which means a lot of good football talk, a lot of good hockey talk, and baseball talk as well. But until then, we'll see you. Bye-bye.